Southern Chronicles by me, James Joseph Lafferty. Foreword. Past keeper for Christopher Reynolds, my brother cousin. It is not me alone who breathes, my people, but you who breathe through me. I, Bard, cherish you and every breath you give me. I bear your pain as mine, and my soul has the marks of our oppression. She feels the pangs of Angor Tamor, and the green of the grass dew stains her face. I see again Anne Saggart at the Mass Rock, eyes alert for the advent of peelers. With land seizures and evictions, the native sons awaiting the moon rising. I carry such images as though etched in the very core of me. I breathe and the winds of the past blow again like a breeze through the grove of my being. I, Bard, grieving the clans in the depth of my heart, bone of their bones, blood of their blood still coursing in outrage through the years, the winds of memory that stir the shadows remnant in my soul. Chronicles of the King. Introduction. The Chronicles of the King began with my first visit to Donad in 1995. I caught the experience there in my poem Donad, a poem which captured a spiritual awakening. This was followed by the mysterious photograph taken on Donad in 1999. I shall herewith present the poem together with a prose rendering of my advent to this sacred place in 1995 and 1999. Donad. As I stood on rock where the kings of Dalriada stood, Christian was not how I felt. The wind, eerie and singular, reinforced the sense of mystery, the sacred that dwelt there in the shifting light. Totemic boar etched in rock, a bridge to the other world, spiritual guide and nourishment. His fierce, wild, untamed essence drawn on to imbue metal in those he faced. Here, the newly crowned took on his tenacity and courage. A place too for regal foot, where the king vowed to continue the culture of his people and hold sacred the gods our people swore by, until Dalriada, like Tara, passed, and the grieving wind now blows the grass around the hill of Donad. Ogham, language of mystery, script of trees, lines of the druid, the dance of meaning in a meaningful place, the centre now shaped to the margins as the world moves and the wind weaves the grasses and kisses the script incised on the crowning rock of a fated kingdom. On this height I was connected, a stone, plain stream and keening wind conjured a moment of grace, a gift of continuity to me. By the gods my people swear by, I pledge the same. Seeking the stones. In 1995, I had an inexplicable urge to stand at the centre of a circle of standing stones. I looked through a book on prehistoric Scotland and found a number of sites of standing stones and cairns in a place called Kilmartin Valley, not too far distant from my home base of Dumbarton. On the morning I was to go to Kilmartin, I ventured to Dunbuoy, Yellow Fort, a hill overlooking the River Clyde on which had stood a watchtower BCE. As I made my way up around 7 a.m, I took a wrong turning and found myself at the gate of a field of sheep. Suddenly, a man drove up in a Land Rover to ascertain if I was lost. My goal was explained and, in the general run of the conversation, Kilmartin was mentioned. He then told me I should not miss Donad. This too was in the book, but I had not picked up on it as I'd been seeking the stones, not forts. Considering what was to transpire, this farmer takes on more of a shepherd's role. On going to Kilmartin, I found a veritable treasure of standing stones, cairns, circles, as well as the fort. Donad is a hill 176 feet high, standing in the valley of the River Ad. The summit is accessed through a path that snakes its way up past the house through a stone gully. Just short of the summit, there is a rock upon which is carved the figure of a wild boar, Ogham, and the shape of a foot. On this rock, it turns out, the kings of Dalriada were crowned in the 6th century. At the top of Donad, I was awed by a singular wind that blew eerily, and the whole experience took on a spiritual hue. As I was leaving, I was taken by the numerous rocks strewn about the hill, and the idea of a settlement being built up around them. The rocks imprinted on my mind. In 1999, I returned to Donad with my niece, Catherine. While there, I read her a number of poems, including my poem Donad. When we were about to leave, Catherine said she should take a picture of me there because I loved the place so much. I eventually agreed. She took a picture from the level below the peak shooting up. When the film was developed upon my return to Canada, the picture taken by a cheap Kodak had doubly exposed to create a startling image showing myself horizontal and vertical in the same frame. Considering the earlier feeling of 1995, this image reinforces for me my special affinity with the fort on the Ad. Over the years, I have discussed my experience on Donad with many people in an attempt to tease out its potential meaning. The responses have been diverse and coloured by the varied beliefs of the respondents. On occasion, people would ask me what I thought of the phenomenon. Here is my answer from the first time I saw the double exposed image. In my imagination, I feel that I was an Irish druid who had converted to Christianity and had come from Ireland with Columba. As Columba would have been the spiritual head of the area and was a cousin of one of the kings of Dalriada, I feel he would have visited Donad and I had come with him. Having adopted the boar as an emblem, totem, since first seeing the engraving on Donad in 1995, I always note any information I find on the subject. Around Christmas of 2003, I was in a bookstore in Guelph when I came across a bestiary in which was a decent write-up on the boar, and as I stood reading, I almost fell over when I found the following. The Druids called themselves boars because they sought the trees for isolation. I later went on the net to search for Druid plus boar. On the 7th site, the Druid Path, I came across a listing of totem animals, including the boar. I brought up the information on the boar only to decide I would not have time to read it at that moment, so I printed it. Later I looked over the printout and discovered on the second page the image of the boar's head superimposed on standing stones, a dolmen. The circle had completed. The first impulse in my gut that had brought me to Templewood and Donad was contained in an image with a totemic animal that had been discovered while there. I feel my imagination has been vindicated. Some time after my first visit to Donad, I learned of another compelling connection with the boar. My mother had told me that her mother, born on the Murrisk overlooking Clwbea in Mayo, had informed her that we are descended from Gronwael, Grace O'Malley, the Irish pirate queen of the late 16th century. Perfect. It turns out that prominent on the O'Malley coat of arms is a red boar, where the boar signifies the deportment of our warrior and the red military strength and generosity. In 2008, I was with a group of spiritual seekers on a pilgrimage to Ireland under the banner Rekindling Indigenous Spirituality. Among the group were a number of natives of Turtle Island, as well as OISE faculty members and sundry Irish or Irish diaspora. One participant in the group was an Irish Cherokee woman who told me at one point, after I had shared a poem with those in attendance, that there was an ancient man dressed in raiment who accompanied me and showed himself to be most pleased with me. I never thought much of this revelation until I was caught up in a very mysterious illness in 2019. It was around May of that year, while visiting in-laws in Ottawa, I was struck with a horrendous pain in both my shoulders. It felt, as I lay in bed that night, as though I was crucified, so painful was the agony felt. It created a sleepless state as I sought ways to find ease to no avail. Later at home, I related the story of my shoulder pain to a shamanic friend in the States. He indicated that sometimes such an unforeseen pain can occur in certain people of a sensitive nature and is linked with the spiritual realm, namely, a spirit seeking assistance from beyond. He informed me that he had a friend who might be able to help me. This friend, Damaris by name, after a brief discussion of my background, went on a shamanic journey to discover what might lie behind my distress. Eventually, she determined that I was linked with a former king and his son from Donad, a finding that seemed in keeping with the ancient scene attending me in Ireland. Damaris was able to share the following from her vision. A young, desolate king weeping over a discarded crown. The king as a skeleton bearing within his frame a smaller skeleton and 2 cups of libation. She felt, as outlined in my poem Donad, that I had made a vow and that the king's visitation was to keep me to my promise. Thus was planted the seed for the Chronicles. In this work, I, Seamus, address the spirits of the king, Fla, his son, Mac, and a representative of the bardic order, Aliach. As I worked out in the back patio, typing the final section of the poem on my tablet, a monarch butterfly flew in. He descended to my left, then up behind my head before rising on my right side. He repeated this manoeuvre 3 times in all before flying off. I found this behaviour unusual, and during his swooping the thought of Fla came to my mind, followed immediately by the phrase, "Free at last." Here is a poem which I wrote 10 or 11 years ago, which seems to hold precognitive elements of the current work. Vision. I hear your voice carried on the wind, reminding me of the gift that is tradition. I'm aware of your light through the sight of my soul. It blesses and warms, enlivens and strengthens, creates a profound and far-reaching vision. Peering into the beauty that is life, awestruck, wandering its depth, the light that enters each heart like lightning, opening the wonders of the world. I see through the forest in the dying light, happy in the midst of my silent and still soul. I stand in thought in the deepest part of the Nematon, the grove where rests the peace long sought after, now spreading its light to confront the inner dark. From the soul's heart we work the light to make the darkness clear. It is time to seek vision before it melts in the rhyme-filled air, seeking in words to recapture what was hidden in the maw of ignorance. Beat on the heart's anvil with the hammer of the soul, the words that spell out remembrance. It is in seeing through feeling that brings vision, rather than a flash bright and immediate. Vision simmers in the distillation of the soul. It broods in the crannies of the heart, awaiting fermentation and freeing. It ascends from the depths, forcefully fashioning in words as it surfaces. People speak of visions as though something outside coming in, but it may well be that visions are born in the dark of our souls, projected and read as from the outside. Visions are the sparks of the divine within, the essence in all that lies buried in the penumbra of our being. Let us turn there to free the light, to grace the star-blessed planet, and promote the healing of the whole. Part 1. Aileach the Bard. Seamus, what aid do you have for me, Aileach? Aileach. We bring you imagery of the heart. We bring depth of thought. We hover over your own heart as a source to exemplify your nature. We ask you to ponder our ways and take your mind to rest on our methods of address and rhetoric. The beauty of the bardic order is reflected in the soul. It can be ascertained by way of meditation and contemplation. It will rise in you. The beauty is a universal spring which you will be able to reach with the lens of your mind, consciously or unconsciously. Beauty is truth, as Keats would say, and truth is beauty. Your own discernment will bring you this beauty. It is not far off, but stays very close. You need only reach out for it. The beauty of the bardic order is a sight that resides inside and can be uncovered or discovered very easily as you pay attention to your dreams and meditations. It is soul and heart stuff. We believe you are already a part of the order. Remember that it is not about you. It is about the people, the tradition, the culture. It is about the craft, finding the plateau and staying there. You need to be dedicated and constant in your endeavour. Read widely and well. Be steady and solid in all you do. Seek the most accurate words, not necessarily the most decorative. If it is a question of following what's in your head or your spirit heart, the latter should be chosen due to the paucity of historical record. Seek out the books, but rely on intuition beyond what you can find there. We believe that your books on or off bardic poetry will be useful to give you an overview of methods and so forth. They will be portals to the world with which you want to become familiar. Do not be afraid of throwing yourself into your quest. Do not hesitate. It is there for the taking. It is held within your innate power. You already have means at hand. You just have to apply yourself wholly to the task. We believe, as you have said, by the time you have finished with these pages, you will have the makings of your Oran Mor there in your hands. You will only have to sift through it to extract the gold from the fluent stream. The work will be all but done. The craft to make the flood of words echo is within. You will create beauty of the bardic order, a member in good standing, though lodged in the 21st century. Seamus, what has been your inspiration, Aileach? We are inspired by a plurality of things within the unity. The potential nobility and integrity of the human heart is a key factor in our stirring. The natural world is a constant where changing beauty captures the soul's eye. The buds of spring burgeoning into splendid flowers, the dappled sky of morn and eve, its blues, greys, pinks and fire, the flush of morn and the cool shifting shadows of eve, the eyes of young lovers caught in a warm sympathy, the hesitant amble of old men, still poised in their dignity, the glorious gift of trees, home of the little ones fell and feathered, shelter against the scorching star, silent sentinels holding the very hush of life. The sights and sounds of water in all its forms, the clamour of the sea as it roars and rakes the pebbled shore, a swelling cacophony to stir the soul. In contrast, the gentle stream tumbling from a rise singing a paean to the morning light. The tumult of a waterfall cascading from a height wearing down the rocks below, a fitting metaphor for life's adversities. There is a further beauty in the power of a lightning strike in a brooding storm, both electrifying to see and threatening in its destructive potential. The rain can bring its catastrophic floods, sweeping all before them, or it can fall gently, mist-like, on the thirsty fields. There is much beauty that holds this dual nature as you outline in your poem, The Rose. The Rose. The rose unfolds a natural grace, an unfurling velvet with a fragrance so full, soulful, it drowns the nearby air. Its sight and smell snare the senses. So compelling, we reach to possess its proffered beauty, only to grasp the protective thorn which guards its soft yielding. We are caught, like fish by a bright lure, and the hook of pain replaces the budding joy. So often a gleam holds within it an unobserved peril that surprises the clouded, yearning eye. There is beauty full-blown in those who selflessly give of themselves to others like flour, those who with courage seek the welfare of the poor, who strive to recognise the dignity of everyone, the rights of even the least among us, those who stand against the mean and the cruel in a bid to redirect them to more humane paths. There is beauty in a telling conversation where both listen as well as speak, the knowing smile of a loved one speaking in depth without words. There is great beauty in silence, a commingling with the source. We can find beauty in all virtue, truthfulness, the seed of trust, patience, the mother of many others, gentleness, the bridge to peace, kindness, the kernel of compassion, courage, the essence of veracity, compassion, the guiding star of true humanity, being human with love, the greatest of all beauty. The awe of mountains, the purling stream, the flash of the salmon's leap, the ice-cloaked trees glittering in the winter sun, the moving song that touches the yearning heart, these too we see as beautiful. Like creators of beauty throughout time, we search inside for the seam of gold that we might bring it to the surface to form and shape it into an artifact to catch the mind, please the ear and engage the heart. Seamus, how do I create beauty in such harrowing and ugly times, Alliacht? Alliacht, you must rise above the squalor of the age, transcend the desolation that besets you, find your true path and don't be waylaid from it. When you enter through the portal of your inner self, there you will find the harmony you seek. Do not be lulled by the life of the surface world which distract you from your quest. Rise beyond the conditioning, the pain that would ensnare you, the suffering that would hold you down. Build out from your heart a place of peace and hold that before you as an offering to the world. Let your aspect be that of serenity. Do not allow any external situation interrupt or interfere with the peace. Make it a constant. What else can you do against the barbs and darts that are cast in the world of harshness and hostility? Seamus, how do you feel about me trying my hand at the Jinshanochs, Alliacht? Alliacht, yes indeed, you might trace place names around the dun and explore their meaning in depth with lyrical power and exactness. It is a wondrous thing to adorn our culture with such gems, to lay out the very place that holds the heart of the people, the ground upon which we stand that engages us daily and unifies us. In truth, it defines us and gives us identity. Do not let the lack of a root be a stumbling block, but rather use your spirit and imagination as guides to stride over it. There will be great joy in this for you. It is a wonderful opportunity for you to touch on the bond between your people and the natural world in which they totally immerse themselves. The connection will show itself vibrantly. They are part and parcel of the land on which they stand. There are gems to be found and placed in specially crafted mounts. This is a wondrous calling and was obviously indicated in a dream you had some time ago in which Seamus Heaney suggested that you fashion a book of place poems. This memory prompts another, when Mary Madison felt you should write a book with healing in its title. These paths are already laid out for you to tread. We commend them to you. Seamus. Bardic poetry was so intricate, it is hardly going to be repeated in modern English. What think you, Aliacht? Aliacht. Do not concern yourself with the intricacies of Gaelic forms. Rather make your words work for you to create poignancy and depth. You can study the craft of the bards and carry those parts that most take your fancy and which will work to grace the effect in modern times. The more reading of the bardic order you do, the better will be the reproduction of their methods. You have to write with the heart and soul of a bard. It is too late in the day for you to go through all the years of learning, and who is there to teach you? You will have to go with your intuition and have faith in what moves there. As we have said before, your reading will not hinder you, but you must have faith in your own soul's wisdom. It will carry you. Read your Jinshanach's books and your material on language to break down meaning to its deepest roots. There will be many metaphors and images to glean from this process. Remember your poem on the seal. Translation. The rhythm of the primal sea beats ceaselessly on Connemara stone. The place in Gaelic, Cloch Naron, stone of the seals. Anglicised round stone, the mystery evaporates. Stone of the seals, a touchstone for shared community. The play of seals on a sun-drenched rock, the sigh of the seal, a human mime through the mist, a cry in the briny air, like a mother keening a lost child. The evocative eyes, liquid and lamenting, sealing a pact with fellow mortals. In those depths, hints of a consolation, a commonality translated by the swimmers of the stone into the human heart. Perhaps they are human souls revisiting stone, lost at sea. Remember also to find a place for the praise poem, person, animal or thing. Gratitude is a wonderful virtue, and you should let it loose in the story of our King and in your personal poems as you journey. Bringing the notions of praise, gratitude and blessing allow your verse to glow against the shadow that may linger elsewhere in your work. It is the balance that would help bring an equilibrium to the written life. Ode to the Sun. I saw the sun run in the freedom of spume clouds, a flashing wheel of fire, a burst of light diffusing all around, a tender hush of glory holding the world in seemingly perfect balance, save for the stars' static whirling. The sun did not spin, but could have been swimming. There was no spectrum, but it was contained in light. It was light to the power wonder. It was light magnified, a grace, a gift, a blessing to a soul filled with awe. Seamus, am I looking in the right places for bardic beauty, Aliacht? Aliacht, the beauty you seek is all around you. You do not have to concern yourself with the right place or time. It is ever present and will reveal itself if you remain open, sensitive to its call, in essence and at core. It exists inside in the vision of your intuition, in images conjured up in your imagination. It is in the yens and language of your living soul. Beauty reveals itself, for example, in the stillness of the dawn and the close of the day. It reveals itself in the dynamic of contrasts, in the sound of the human voice in song, of water as it gurgles in a falling brook, in the wind a whisper in the mottled wood. It is revealed as awe arises in the heart at the sight of a mountain sentinel against the sun, the fresh fall of ever-deepening snow, the grace of a running doe, the power of a swooping hawk, the fiery flash of lightning in the blackness of an advancing storm, the gleam in the eye of a smitten lover, the delicate purity of innocence, the heartiness of true justice, full and ripe, the constancy and the depth of our being, the wonder of our senses through which we engage such beauty. Be alert as you move in the world. Everything is open to feed the imagination. Nothing is too small nor trivial. All around seeds the soul. A creative soul takes its raw ore into the smelter of the heart to fashion works of grace. Seamus, how do you decide on ideas, themes, motifs, images, etc.? Aliacht. The key to writing is first and foremost to pay attention. Remember and be guided by the wonderful title of a book you once owned on reading literature, Passionate Attention. This is a fine practice to bring latent talent to life, to fill the mind with wondrous activity, to convert the observations into the magic of metaphor, the deftness of simile, the prize of a precious poem. It is very facile to live life without being aware. It is better to be involved in some kind of mindfulness, a heightening of the senses, a focus on what you are doing, what you see, what you hear. Pay attention and store all that might have import into your memory. Remember, this is your task as a bard. Carry forth our tradition, commingled with all your experiences, a shifting shadow of life, the rising and fading of the natural world. Seamus, could you recount some of the bard's functions, Aliacht? Purpose of the bard is to praise the chieftain or king, or curse those who have slighted or wronged him, his king or his people. His task included praising the king, but not in a way to promote hubris, but rather to impart the ethos of the clan and urge him to live up to those standards, stirring the warriors to valour, encouraging the hearts, singing to swell the soul, comforting the anguished, celebrating community, entertaining at feasts and giving counsel to the king regarding the experience of his many itinerant forays. It is for the bards as for the druids to carry forward the culture of the people, their tales and traditions. Seamus, could you speak on the Tree of Life, Aliacht? You should spend time reading up on the many facets of this motif. Balance and harmony were the main stress in what you have found thus far. You will recall the image of the tree where the roots are co-equal with the branches and thus images perfectly this given definition. When compared to the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Bible, it obviously carries a more positive numen. So much of the biblical story is negative in comparison to the Celtic world. It is as though the Christian Judeo world threw buckets of ice over the passionate Celts, leaving them dispossessed in spirit long before the English were to do it physically and politically. The exuberant and open-hearted way of the people was stymied, this way of life hollowed out by the prohibitions and varying thoughts of the new Christian ways. The truncated life that Christianity brought with it is incredible to ponder. The reduction of joy, the narrowing of freedom, the diminishment of a full and robust life. Seamus, what do you feel were the most profound wounds left by the Gaels after the Edenic forbidden tree smashed the Celtic tree of life, Aliacht? The wound suffered by the toppling of the tree of life by its biblical counterpart is the denial of immortality, save for such drastic conditions. A hell if you refuse a very narrow, soul-bruising way of life, and a sterile heaven if you walk it. We have been wounded by a diminishment of our very vitality, our sense of living as part of nature and not in dominion over it. This change in perspective has reduced the beauties of the world into commodities. The hubris of humankind is heightened and surely can produce nothing but the destruction of the natural earth and her bounty. We are tragically displaced from our true status in the scheme of things. The wound too includes the separation of our people from their fundamental traditions. The Christian Church has usurped our sacred days, our holy wells and places held dear to our hearts in order to persuade them surreptitiously to join the new creed. Our people would hardly have made the transition without being lured by these familiar aspects of their ancient ways. A clear Christian ruse, but the motion tends to bleed out the sustenance of our own beliefs, leaving but a pale, empty shadow of what once was. The elan of life thus threatened and questioned by the intrusive creed leaves our world broken and hollowed out. Seamus, what can we do to heal the wounds of the past, Aliacht? We must restore a healthy respect for the natural world and all the flora and fauna held within it. We must move out of the negative shadow of the Christian faith with its hell and its overbearing hierarchy. We may hold dear to our human hearts the compassion and care vouchsafed by Jesus the man, who gave us in his life a good model of how to be decent human beings. In our treatment of the earth, we should reject the biblical admonition to dominate the animals. Rather, we should accept them as our fellow creatures and live in harmony with them. We must seek ways to avoid pettiness, ways of feeling superior by casting others down, ways of self-aggrandizement. We must remember the golden rule spread ubiquitously across our world. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This rule is for all time. We should heal the wounds of greed, of possessiveness, and return to a time when all was held in common, especially the land, the mother who sustains all her children, the great clan. Greed is a blight on tradition, as it permits some to wander rootless without a roof over their heads and hungry, while others gorge themselves on overly laden tables. These are blemishes against our tradition and should be set aright as soon as possible. We must learn to care for one another again and share with all the fruits of our benevolent mother. We should learn to communicate more openly, freely, and avoid shamefulness of lying to gain an advantage over a neighbour. We must return to our own legal system which left a man with exile rather than death, reparation rather than imprisonment. The aim always to leave people holding on to the remnants of their dignity as far as possible. A fundamental to our belief is the cyclical nature of the inherent throughout nature's abundance, birth, life, death and regeneration. This notion sits with us more comfortably than the linear mode professed by the Christian Church. We have a more solid footing in the other world than the Christians who behave often in their mourning and grief as though life was over when they die. Despite their supposed belief in the resurrection of Jesus, we have no fear of death and see only a better or greater life in the world to come. Seamus, what do you feel is central to our ethos, Aliacht? We hold truth to be our polar star and the need to be free at the core of our being. We feel that we should bow to no one unless we deign him or her worthy. Our word is our bond. We need always to maintain a dignity of selfhood. This does not mean we yield to selfishness and spurn community. It simply means that at root we are an autonomous adamantine at heart, resistant to the tyrant or any who would try to enslave the freedom of our spirit. Another central part of our ethos mentioned earlier is hospitality, together with its handmade generosity. We are duty-bound to welcome the stranger. No questions are asked of a visitor before hunger is sated. We give unsparingly of our resources, our food, our drink, our hearth, a place to lay one's head. Should the host have 2 cloaks and the visitor was in need, a cloak would be gifted. In the same manner, no member of the clan is left wanting. The Commonwealth is central to our way of life. There is, despite a kingship, a sense of joint holding of the land. The kingship is given to a man who is felt to be the best to lead the people. He may be the best warrior, he may be considered the wisest, and so forth. The king's son did not automatically inherit his father's crown. There had to be merit involved. A sense of honour was held of great import in the clan. If something underhanded was done, the shame affected all. So too loyalty was an expectation. Betrayal of your king or people was anathema. The bonds of clanship was profound. All relationships were crucial. Seamus, the bardic poetry is of such complexity. How am I to live up to such a tradition, Aliacht? Poetry was indeed very complex in days long gone. The training was long and arduous. We had to learn by heart thousands of verses. It took 9 to 10 years to achieve the role. You cannot possibly do this. It is also true that Gaelic lent itself to the lattice work created in the wondrous weave of our verse. Our advice to you is to say first that what was rendered in Gaelic cannot easily be fashioned in Berla, as there is little sense in attempting such intricacies. You may, as you did in a Celtic blessing, adopt syntax and phraseology found in Gaelic. A Celtic blessing. Blessed to you the way under your feet. Blessed to you the hope in your swelling hearts. Blessed to you the love spilling from your soul-charged eyes. May you be able to hear each other in the soft rustle of your fears. May you be balm to each other's brokenness. May you be to each other in anxious moments the tree's shade in the heat of the day. May you be a fruitful branch on the tree of life, burgeoning with vitality and bountiful grace. May the branches of your being bridge the gap between you, and may you not lean too heavily on each other, bending your true shape. May your joys be as plentiful as the grass, and sorrows drop sparsely to flow swiftly away. May you have the courage to dare, and wisdom to seize your chances, which fade like the colours of spring. In the hushed stillness of your souls, may you build your place of peace. May you be full in your living. May you be deep in your thinking. May you be endless in your loving. And may the Creator God keep you in the eye of his compassion forever. Your heart and soul will carry you in the way of the bard, and your work will surely follow. Lose yourself in the spirit that leads you, and it follows as the day does the night that you will reach the apex of your writing, and in so doing fulfill your seeming fate to help heal and bless your people. Seamus, where does the connection lie between the River Eramosa in Ontario and Danad, Aliacht? There is a unity in all the earth. All that lives thereon look up to the same trillions of stars, walk under the same sun and sky, sleep under the same luminous moon. There is, as there has always been, much more that we hold in common as human beings than tears us apart as adversaries. We have for long held on the latter and refused the egalitarian paean proffered by the former. Where would we be if we viewed each other and everyone as a member of the same race, carrying in her or his heart the same hopes? If we really felt this way, would that not bring out our compassion and empathy, rather than our hubris and greed? This is a lesson to be taken when you consider the Eramosa and Danad. They are essentially the same stuff. The river will have its own message to give you as that which came so clearly to you on Danad. Perhaps it will not be as dramatic, but you know already there is something special at the breakwater where you go for the elements at Samhain. You know also you have an affinity with water, as you do with trees, and it is only a matter of time before something of poetry and magic happens to you with regard to these. As you have said before to Damaris, you have to open yourself to the environment where you have spent so much of your life. It is doubtful if this is not as great a part of your destiny as the dun on the ad. Your rootlessness caused by your immigration has left you in a sense without a home. But remember, the entire earth is your home, and you should allow yourself the comfort of home where you are. Remember Father Bill Clark's observation at Frank Custler's funeral. all water is holy. And Chris Reynolds' variant, all land is the holy land. Let the river Aramosa speed, join the ad to water the seeds of your soul. Seamus, what else might I explore to bring this work to fruition, Aljacht? Aljacht, I feel you should remain fully open to what can be garnered from mindfulness and everyday experience. To aid the writing, do so daily. Do not be afraid to break through the boundaries of convention. Flow, as the Tao says, with softness and gentleness over the boulders and blocks that may litter your path. Have faith that you shall be able to move mountains by adopting this flow that always seeks the lowest point, that calls for the least aggrandizement, that falls naturally with humility. Not subservience, but egolessness. The goal perhaps for which to aim is a simple, aware life, not shackled by grasping materialism. Seek contentment and purity of heart, devotion to the marginalised and justice driven by compassion. Translate the purity of the little Kaiser voices singing Stille Nacht to you on the telephone at Christmas into a poetry of bardic beauty that will move the heart of all. Seamus. I read over the bard's voice and feel it brings forth our culture in a modern dress. What say you, Aljacht? Aljacht, I believe this is the second time you have perceived in a piece written some time ago elements that address your current quest. You had begun your work on the king even as you stood at the top and the foot of Donad on the first visit. There was with the shifting wind a comparable shift in your soul, and you knew as you stood there that the world had changed for you forever. The transcendent had touched down, alit in the very core of your being, even as you walked away from Donad in 1995. You knew your spiritual trajectory had been altered and your path passed through an open portal. The photograph 4 years later set the seal on the fort as being a most significant, nay, sacred place to your being. The bard's voice. He would speak like waves on the welling ocean, a voice rising and falling, crashing with loudness or quiet, barely audible, like a whispered prayer to a silent God. He ranted, he railed, spoke from cavernous depths, rending the motionless air like a storm rising in the still of the desert, shifting sand. The voice awakened the heart, shook it, wrung it, until so moved the soul, sailed on seas of emotion and elation. So too, when the voice, more breeze than gale, dropped softly upon the waiting ears and longing hearts, called gently upon the dormant spirit. 2. From the throat of fire, the words like lava pour out to burn themselves into the adamantine heart. A voice for the open air, like a clear ringing bell in the gloaming. He speaks as though disembodied, as though all were voice, as though the bush burned again. What this thunder said was hold to the ways, treasure the values, keep true to the benign traditions, love the language, the very core, respect the mother, be not drawn by greed or lost in corruption. Remember the tales, the history, the ballads and rhymes, the reels, the pibrochs, make fast to the given trove, keep faith with hearth and heritage. The bard's voice stores within it the encrypted tradition, carried down the ages like the echo of the sea in a shell. The bard's voice forceful, forming words with the rhythms of constancies, edged and rounded at one with the wind, just so, as it shakes the leaves. Words that whirl in air, patterns of meaning, stirring and formidable, move the human heart. 3. Out of the silence breaks the bard's voice, placing things in order in the great frame. The bard dips into his crane bag and fills the air with images, shaping again the tribal soul. As the echo of the past grows weaker, the ways of our fathers need to be remembered, retained. The smeared ashes, the embers of our custom, our tradition, stoked to flame. How to work the weave, renew the fabric, gather the bits and pieces still held and vibrant, to refashion, no matter the gaps, the story of his people. Let the bard's heart as keeper give voice to the whispers of the past as gift to the future. Part 2. Fla the King. Seamus, what would you have me do, sire? Fla, I would have you relate to the people of your time how we lived, what values were ours, what we held dear to our hearts and venerated. Values, for example, like the triad reputed to have been given by Oisin, the son of Finn MacCool, to St. Patrick when the saint had asked the warrior poet what had sustained his people before the advent of Christianity. The truth that was in our hearts, and strength in our arms, and fulfilment in our tongues. Truth is a rock on which we stand. I would have you speak of the great honour in which we held our gods and goddesses, and the central place we afforded after truth, generosity and hospitality, the abuse or misuse of which was a grave offence indeed. On a more personal level, I would have you unfold the disagreement and the tension symbolised in that other triad of Damaris's vision, the young king, his crown discarded, weeping, the skeleton king bearing a second skeleton within, and the 2 cups of libation. Seamus, should I act something akin to your modern bard, sire? Fla, that would be a most appropriate stance for you. You could create for me a chronicle in prose and poetry which would weave together the broken threads of our ways to arch over and fashion our tradition on a fresh loom, producing a beautiful tapestry of my kingdom. That which has been forgotten will be remembered. Seamus, how will you communicate with me, sire? Fla, I shall come to you in dreams, in the wind, as you walk in the vibrant woods, on the shores of the lapping lake, in the silence of your soul, in the very rhythm of your heart. I shall walk with you in the brightness of the day and in the deep darkness of the night, whispering in your ear as we wend the way together. Seamus, you spoke of St. Patrick with Oisin earlier. How do you feel about the coming of Christianity, sire? Fla, I feel there is merit in the sense of Christ's teaching. Their priests have been clever in the way they adopted and adapted our high feast days and sacred places. They took, for example, our holy wells, calling them after their saints, but the power of the natural world did not spring from their new names. It was ever imbued in itself. The healing potency was always there and sustained us. They renamed our cyclical feast days, for example, Samhain, the end of our year, October 31st, a thin time when the spirits of our ancestors slipped through the crack in the year's cusp to visit among the living. A vibrancy, a communion of the worlds. The Christian Church rid the time of its purpose, simply naming the evening All Hallows' Eve, Halloween, the evening before the Feast of All Saints. Something quick and meaningful became only a marker for praising those who were considered venerable to the Church. The next day, November the 2nd, they named the Feast of the Holy Souls, a catch-all notion to ensure no dead Christian in a state of grace was overlooked during the period. Samhain was a time when a great ethos of our people, hospitality, came to the fore, because on that night we laid out place for our visiting spirits with victuals for their consumption. Our feasts were actual, not pretended. Christianity sought to dampen down our nature. Our passion was over-subdued. We tended to reject our physical bodies more, developing a greater sense of duality than heretofore. Our traditional ways lent more to a sense of unity of body and spirit. They tried to enforce on us a sense of sin and damnation, something that ran contrary to our sense of the afterlife. For us, after death, we set sail for Tirnanog, the land of the young, a paradise where we resumed our youth in a land of abundance. There was no darkness nor burning fire, only a heaven at the end of our days. This is the reason that our ancestors went to battle naked, save for a torque, because the warriors believed themselves immortal. They might die to this life, but their souls marched on. As with Samhain, Imbolc, the coming of the Lamb, milking, was subsumed by the Christians. The nursemaid of Christ, St. Bridget, was given aspects of our own great mother, Bridget, the great goddess of the Celtic people. For our people then, the world was animate. We were pantheistic. There was spirit in the water for living, cleansing and healing. In the trees, our nurturing brothers. In the very rocks, stones which we held sacred that our ancients had raised to stand. The Christians in turn would carve their symbols of the cross on the standing stones, seemingly always wishing to garner the numen of our sacred objects. They were most astute in this regard, as it made it easier to convert our people when they used the already sacred to lead them to the new faith. The Christian way created, as I have implied, a split in the self, a body and a soul. Some are polluted with the sense of dread of a brutal afterlife, a vexation in the kingdom. Our Druids, the bearer of our tradition and our spiritual leaders, were attacked by Christian priests in a way that runs contrary to the supposed charity of this overbearing faith. Seamus, would you speak further on your beliefs to clarify my understanding, sire? Fla. Yes. For us, the world around us lived. We moved and had our being as part of the greater whole. The mother who sustained us in every way. She blessed us with the river to slake our thirst and cleanse our bodies. The water pure, life-bringing. The sea, not too far off, gave us the finny ones, a silvery hoard. The land, our fertile lady, blessed with grain and fodder, through which we raised our beef and mutton, which in turn graced our tables. We are a part of the teeming abundance, as we too partake in and of the bounty of the mother, her grateful children. Seamus. That the source, the mother, lives in all things was a finding I had when I first climbed Anad. The wind, as it whipped from the low-lying terrain up around the hill, moved me as though it was alive. The rocks too seemed imbued with life. The whole hill held an animated vibrancy. It was as if I woke for the first time to the truth of all being inspirated. I walked away that day changed. Seamus. How were the people sustained, sire? Fla. We had a goodly head of cattle, thus blessed with milk and hides. Goats also added milk to the supply. Sheep supplied wool for blanket and clothing. We planted grain with which to make bannock. There was fish in the river and clams by the shore. These were sufficient for us in the summer, and we stored food in earthen cellars to help fend off the dearth of winter. Some winters could be extremely poor, but we held against them. There were some bad years when we were parched by drought or the rains blew in torrentially from the rolling Atlantic, but we survived it all. Our people always proved to be resilient. It failed to quell one of my fears, however, that a day might come when they would grow hungry as the black blight of famine would flail the land. Seamus, what of enemies, sire? Fla, there was a constant threat from the east and north where the Picts dwelt. They were fierce and once gained hegemony over Dalriada for a number of years. Another potential foe were the Britons to the south in the region of Altcluth, the Rock of the Clyde. There were clashes with them. A favoured tactic of the tribes was the cattle raid. A measure of wealth of any king or chieftain lay in the herd of cattle he maintained. The clan had always to be on the alert for such forays. We held our own in this regard. For most of my days we were at peace with our neighbours, though as fate would have it I was slain in a skirmish with Picts from the Tay region. Seamus, what was the status of women in Dalriada, sire? Fla, women were held in high regard in our society. They were seen as manifestations of Mother Earth. They too gave birth and were the nourishers of our people. Their equality with their male counterparts was reflected in their status as warriors. If they were fit and adept, they could join in the fray. There were evil men who used and abused women as through the ages, but that was rare, as a true man's honour would disavow him of such vile actions. Women were the caretakers and nurturers of our children. They were often among the wisest, and their words were heeded in our councils. Women, being the bearers of the fruit of life, were attuned to the processes of the turning world. As I have said, they were a reflection of the goddess herself. Seamus, what of the children, sire? Fla, the children are our true treasure. We would go to the very ends of the earth for them. We hold them up, cherish them. The clan is our life. We tend them like the seed sown in the loam to see them grow strong. They are the product of our love. It is through their eyes that we perceive hope. Their mirth echoes through the dun in their raucous laughter, filling the very air with joy. They are our bridge to the future and a solace in our old age, precious to both heart and soul. Seamus, what of your own son, sire, the one known as Mac? Fla, I would that my son bears the boar's courage in battle, that he has a stoutness of heart in all he faces, resolute as an oak. I pray he be honest in all his dealings, a man of honour and straightforwardness, true to his very core. I hope he'll be loving and warm to his offspring, passing on our ways and traditions to them so that they maintain their rightful place in our clan. Our traditions are held most dear as exemplified in the inauguration of the king and his oath to maintain the path of continuity that he swears in the footprint in the rock when he is crowned. We hold our traditions sacred. They are as bright threads holding our clan together in a beautiful tapestry. Break the threads and the tapestry unravels. We are reduced to a tattered remnant, our very soul destroyed. May my son be resolute in this. Seamus, what are some of your fears, sire? Fla, my fears are many. I fear the loss of our way of life as we are encroached upon by the Gaul, the Picts, the Britons, the Angles of Northumbria, and the growing strength of the Christian Church. We are beset on all sides. I fear we will not be able to withstand the fierce onslaught of another Pictish wave in particular. They threaten and have usurped this land before. The greatest threat to our tradition must be that of an expanding Christian church, which condemns many of our tenets as anathema and brands them pagan and superstitious. I am afraid that my sons may die in some ill-conceived venture as they attempt to keep our kingdom secure. It is not only the raiders they face, but the harsh wild of moor and mountain. I fear that if I am slain in some land far from Danad, that I shall not be brought back to my home, but be left on the field to have my eyes plucked out by carrion crow and my flesh torn by kites. O let me rest here with my people at the end of my days, or be ferried over to lie with my peers on Inishnarunya, island of the Druids, later Iona, the cemetery of the kings. To have my body lie without dignity or closing rite would run contrary to my soul's desire, and it would be left to wander the surface world endlessly, nomadic and unhoused, until someone brought atonement. Life can be so unkind, death unkinder. One can look after oneself strong and alive, but in old age and death one relies on others to guard one's dignity and cherish one's desires. I hope always to maintain my mortal strength and, like the cornered boar, be fierce in my courage. I worry too about the advent of the wolf of famine to lay waste my people, weaken them, leave them as shadows in the mist, reduced to bone as though flayed. I pray daily to our gods to hold this scourge from us. I fear contention among the people when it comes time to replace me. We have some keen and capable contenders, including Mac, who will vie strongly for the crown. This seeking pride of place can often lead to strife. Remember the triad of the king. He must be truly just, truly hospitable, and truly compassionate. Seamus, what pleases you, sire? Fla, the light in children's eyes, the burnished sun over the western islands, the joy on my wife's face when I return from war, a fine dram of whisky on a blustery night, an undisturbed refreshing sleep, the sound of lowing cattle on the lea, a walk in autumnal woods, the eagle's majesty in flight, the resilience of the cornered boar, the mist of morning on the heather-clad hills, the sea's power pummelling the shore, the enchantment of birdsong at dawn, the smell of wood smoke and the allure of the fire's flame, the sun breaking through cloud, the sun's rays painting the forest path through the trees, an enchantment, tramps o'er the Moyen Moor with my favourite hounds, the gambol of the lambs at Imbolc, the clamorous howl of the wolf in the light of the moon, the bard as he chants the glory of the clan, the harpist playing to make the heart tremble, seeing the beauty and vitality in the natural world, the sun's life bestowing warmth, the stoic, sturdy trees, a model for humankind, the call of the curlew across the morass, the glorious panoramas from heights that expand the heart, the sun a-glitter on loch's smooth surface, grasses as they pray in the wind, the pattering of soft rain on our roof, the dazzle of snow on a wintry morn, the multicolours of our setting star, a work of celestial art in the sky, the fresh briny air by the sea, the scent of the wild heather and the blessing of the eye-catching rowan in the glory that is autumn. All these and more bring pleasure to me. Seamus, what are your griefs, sire? Fla. I grieve over squabbles that our people engage in, using up energy better used for other things. I grieve for the passing away of our old ways which held us united and resolute. I grieve over the swiftness of our lives here on earth. I mourn the loss of strength as we grow older. I grieve over the rebelliousness of youth and their lack of grace towards their elders, a perennial problem. I grieve the loss of time it takes to become aware of the wisdom there. I mourn the losses in the clan, some taken so young, swept away by disease or in the throes of battle. I mourn the manacle I feel placed upon my spirit by the Christian religion. I welcome their sense of community, of compassion and the way of love, but I wrestle with their concept of sin and their afterlife, where they feel many may be thrust into the fires of hell if they had not lived a life in keeping commandments, gods and the churches. How can a God who created us threaten his creatures with such a punishment, and for eternity? The virgin birth is also a major conundrum for me. I think there must be a more natural way, a brighter and more authentic spiritual path. I grieve the loss of its freedom. Seamus, do you feel weighted down by your duties as king, sire? Fla, there are times when I feel overwhelmed, when we have an insecurity of food, for example, in times of trial, war without and strife within. I have aid in the counsel of my druids, and of late the wisdom of some more open Christian clergy. I am not alone. I also look for advice to the wise mothers among us, the child-bearers and nurturers. Their skills also nurture our souls. The kingship thus is buoyed up with such assistance. I also have my sons to rely on and do my best to make them gentle in their strength. They too may have to bear the same burden which is mine, and I do my utmost to prepare them for potential regal tasks. I treat all the people fairly, and am just in every dealing. I trust them equally, show no favour to one over the other. I intervene in their disputes, often quite petty, and try where I can to lighten their burden. I share what I have, giving of my sustenance to ease those in need. This is what a king must do. Seamus, can you tell me of something for which you are grateful, sire? Fla, I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful to have the warmth and wisdom of my queen there beside me through good or ill. I'm grateful for my strong sons and loving daughter. I'm grateful for the peace we have managed to sustain for so long, no matter how fragile. I'm gratified for the love and loyalty shown to me by most of my kindred and the clan. I am grateful to see the mist burning off the river in the morning light, for the sheer vastness of the domed sky, for the wondrous woods where we go to hunt the wild boar whose flesh sustains us, for the high hills and mountains which present such fine vistas and from where we can spot the arrival of intruders, for the silence that falls over the land with the advent of the dark, and for the refreshment of sleep. I'm grateful for the rain that brings life to the crops and fills the gurgling burns with music to assuage an arid heart. I'm grateful for the myriad of stars in the night sky which guide our helms on the sea and fill our eyes with eternity. I'm grateful for the bounty of flora, the regal splendour of the heather, the sun-drenched broom and always appealing bluebell. The fauna, too, fills me with quietude, the deer that brings venison to our board, and the plucked grouse that graces the table at our feasts. I'm grateful for the life-giving warmth of the sun. I'm grateful for the fire with which we cook, smelt metals, and which keeps the frost from our bones in the ebony of a winter's night. I'm grateful for the laughter of the children, which in its free flow and exuberance remind us of the merriment that is within us, so often overthrown with adult seriousness. I'm grateful for all the good counsel of my kin and for the depth of friendship and love shown to me. These are some of the sources of my gratitude for the great gift of life. Seamus, what makes a good king, sire? Fla, a good king is a servant to all his people, no matter how lowly. We are in this world and time together, and must be supportive one of the other. A good king is just, even-handed, and conducts himself on disputes within the clan without bias. A good king is hospitable. He allows for none to go destitute when his coffers have wealth, or for none to go hungry when food sits in his larder. None in his realm should be without shelter, no matter how humble. A good king is not rigid, but bends to the occasion. He is constant with his spouse, cherishes his children, and is a benediction to his kingdom. Seamus. How are you entertained, sire? Fla. I have my own bards who sing and recite various deeds of past heroic and cautionary tales to guide me. They speak and sing in praise of myself and in honour of the clan. They underscore in their work how I and the people should carry out our lives ethically, with dignity and true purpose. There are also storytellers who keep us entranced and amused with their wondrous tales of history and romance. Likewise, those skilled in dance also perform at our major feasts, competing with one another for a coveted prize. Sometimes the warriors wrestle one another to entertain the people, while keeping sharp and supple for battle. We also have board games like chess, which pass the time away during the long winter nights. Seamus. Do you have much material wealth, sire? Fla. I have little of value that you could hold in your hand. I have a few pieces of gold, but nothing that would start a raid. I have already passed on expensive objects to my family, as I am not given to hoarding such. My riches lie elsewhere, in the bright bond of kinship, in the grace of an agile mind, in the feeling of community amidst the gathered clan, in the warmth of hearing the poignant bard, in the lump in the throat over a sad, well-told tale over the fire. I feel rich when I see my people pull through a disaster together, rich in my constant queen and in the wealth that springs so beautifully from her womb. Ultimately, we are wealthy in the resilience and the indomitable spirit of my people, who face all adversity with an equanimity. Seamus, how do you feel about the kingdom's holding, sire? Fla. Our stead was built around the hill of Donad. The rocks scattered around the hill we used as natural ramparts between which we laid walls to secure a constant boundary. Within the confines of our dun we fashioned roundhouses around and about the inauguration stone. They were principally made of the traditional clays and wattles, the same type we build to shelter the animals during the winter. We also had shedding for grain storage and the like. We used the river for our water supply, carrying it home in wooden buckets connected by a yoke. On the height, we were able to espy anyone approaching from all directions, save for the sea which we watched from a hill nearby. Our enclosure was tight and secure. Seamus, speak to me more of grief, sire. Fla. Grief is a part of the human condition. We love and we lose what we love in time. We Celts, however, have always held that there is an afterlife. So while we grieve someone's passing, we are heartened by the prospect of a happy life to come in Tir na Nog. Grief, though painful, should be brief. As we grow older, those we love fall to death like autumnal leaves to the earth, swiftly and constantly, as though to remind us as we age that our path will come to an end. We should learn to savour such moments, for they are so fleeting, creating in so doing an intensity of life. For the bard, yourself, may you push to fulfil the drive in your soul to leave your work finished and not withered on the vine of your being. Be alert to the murmuring of your heart and dip yourself into the very well of your essence, bringing all you have to the surface before you put your pencil down, emptied, if you do so. Your leaving the world will be one of peace and a sense of completion. There will be nothing left unexplored, nothing left unsaid. all will have been accomplished. You must press on to that goal. You must seek the far shore and the awakening, a fullness of heart. In the end, all our grief, all the sufferings of life will vanish like the mist on the river of morning in the radiant sun of a new day. Seamus, speak of courage, sire. Fla, courage is of the heart. To be brave, we must be ready to love above all else. Go forward and not retreat. Be firm and upright as the trees, as giving as they are, as mutually beneficial one to the other. Courage lifts the self up and out. There's nothing petty anymore. We emit a sense of resource, commitment, adamantine strength. Courage faces the foe, it does not flinch, but shows only resilience. The heart beats life, strength and valour, resolute and free. Courage does not mean foolhardiness. It is used in full knowledge of what it may cost, but not without an examination of the lay of the land and its potential for the success of what's to be done. Courage is facing things yet you did not have to face, but the die is cast and there is no way back. Courage keeps going no matter what the obstacles. Seamus, what occurred with Mac that dashed your hopes for him expressed earlier? Fla, my son was perverse even as a child. He seemed even then to go against the flow. As he grew into adulthood, he became intrigued with the Christian belief that had spread so swiftly through the kingdom, reinforced by Columba's brethren. I tend to be ensconced in our traditional ways, our high feast days that mark the passing of the years, the great affinity with the natural world upon which we stand and be, the nemeton and groves of our ceremonies, the knowledge and oral wisdom of our druids. What do I lack? This is a main contention between us. There is, of course, for mine as for every son, the aspect of how to live vis-à-vis his father, the tension desire within him to surpass his father one way or the other. Does he want to outdo me? Yes, I would say so. My boy, as stated, has embraced the Christian faith, and with great zeal. He hopes to be crowned if the people would have him on the holy Isle of Iona. My own reception on the new ways has been much more tepid. I'm not sure if the new mythology can replace the old in my heart. I would hate to turn my back on the traditions of the ancestors which are etched so deeply in my soul. I feel each people have their own perspective on life, held fast in their lore, sagas and mythologies. It seems to me no matter how potent the new Christian mythology is or how ubiquitous it has become, I do not believe it should be allowed to impose itself on our culture at the expense of the loss of all that we have held heretofore. I feel that we have gone too far in accepting this new mythology as a supreme one, pushing out so many others, demonizing them, creating things of evil where once there were only positive elements to much of our myths. A perfect example of this is in our other worlds, which we saw as being parallel to our own. They were places of joy, where the vital aspects of life here were more poignant and continued even more robustly than on earth. Christianity replaced this utopian vision with the shades of hell, a place of everlasting pain where souls were caught in never-ending fire. What tortured mind would imagine such punishment meted out on those he supposedly created? Seamus, what are your dreams and hopes, sire? Fla, I dream of peace for Dalriada. I hope that my son can find a bride among the Pictish people, so the need for war between us will cease. Such a marriage would, it is hoped, be a guarantee, and we can be relieved of such constant threats from our close neighbours, a movement from foe to friend. This harmony would bring more trade. We can turn from products of war to wares of practical use, which we can market in the realm of our former enemy. How much better will that life be? Death replaced by new vitality, a quietude in place of alarm. Seamus, what do you find positive about Christianity, sire? Fla. I was taken by the character of Jesus, his concern for the lowly, the dispossessed, the poor, those with little to no status. I suppose that this is part of his call to love, to see the beauty in all human beings. I think this is a most worthy goal, which is badly represented in much of the hierarchical church, though perhaps better witnessed in the monasteries. There is even there too much insistence on one's own soul in practice than on the loving collective. The Christians, despite what they say, don't always replicate their lofty thoughts in action. They follow their Jesus often half-heartedly, smug in their own self-worth. They would choose to ignore the wretched at their door. We followers of the wise men of the grove learned early in our days to welcome the stranger at our threshold, not even asking from whence he came until after we had nourished him. Likewise, those among us who eke out their lives with little means are never turned away by those with laden tables, but are given sufficient to send them off sated in this regard. I have no reason to cross into Christianity from where I stand, as I am already deeply engaged in this principle. We Celts hold hospitality as a core value, second only to truth. To be ever hospitable, give of the abundance duly given by Mother Earth, and of the skills, the ability, the talents bestowed by nature. This all goes without saying in our world. Seamus, what further fears do you have for Mac, sire? Fla. I worry of his ability to wear the crown if he be chosen after me. I would be ashamed if he were to bring disrepute upon the clan. In our culture, any action that reflects poorly on the king is not merely a personal dereliction, but reflects badly on the entire community. The burden is visited on all. Should my son show cowardice in battle, the shame reverberates throughout. That is why, when drought or famine comes to the land, the people look to the king's fitness to rule. Mother Earth, the sovereign queen, is seen to go against her own nature to show her disapproval of the current ruler. I worry over his suitability for the crown. He is somewhat feckless, but as he becomes older, let's hope he develops a strength of character to make him a worthy candidate. I have mentioned how he has taken to the new faith like a salmon to the leap. He is a daily communicant and fulfills his obligations faithfully in each season of the ecclesiastical year. He has become a zealot, and like all zealots, he can be overwhelming in his zeal, no doubt turning off many others with his narrow focus, especially as it moves from long-held traditions. Samhain as Halloween is a ghost of what it means for us. Its usurpation into the new faith is a shadow in the darkness, sad without the nearness or the strength of the other world, the thinness of the veil that separates us. The Christians speak of an afterlife but act often as though none exists. They really make mock of Samhain. They fear death because they feel sinful and expect to be punished for their sins in hell or purgatory. Why Mac does not see this unnatural trap is beyond me. How he can bear such a heavy yoke baffles me. Our own beliefs in the potential world to come are so benevolent by comparison. How my son can be ensnared by such a pernicious belief of an inhumane, eternal fire is beyond my ken. Another stumbling block in his devotion to the church is the number of gifts he has bestowed on it and the tithes he has paid to its support. In so doing, he hopes to propel his soul through the gates of their heaven into everlasting bliss. These donations detract from the commonweal of the clan. There are a number among us who could benefit from this largesse flowing to the coffers of the priests and monks. There are needs in the here and now that could be met rather than giving funds away to build up some glory in a world to come and enrich the clergy. I have taken him to task on this, but his heart is usurped by the tenets of his chosen faith. He is dogmatically manacled to his ways and turns away from me and my advisement. Seamus. What else would you have me explore, sire? Fla. I want you to tell of our way of life, the integrity of our hearts, a lack of deviation from our truth, our equality in our treatment of women, our joy in each other, our constant vigil for freedom, and our ever-present building of the commonweal. I would also like you to bring forward aspects of our ways that could be transposed to the 21st century to help heal faction against faction that permeate the world in which you live. True values never become outmoded. There is an essence constant in the human being, and who knows, time wraps itself around us and we move together without knowing it. Seamus. What saddens you about the passing of the old ways, sire? Fla. I am particularly vexed by the passing of our true sovereignty, that of the people. It is usurped more and more by the theocratic structure of the church hierarchy, the bishops seeking the cardinals' hats, the priests the bishops' mitres. These power-hungry churchmen seem to strive only to secure it, leaving little thought for the flock they are meant to shepherd. They seem much more intent on their aggrandizement than seeing to the spiritual and temporal needs they vouchsafed to serve. There may be among them some pious, prayerful personages, but they seem fewer than the leaves holding on to the birch with the advent of wintry winds. There are too many hushed tones in church proceedings, as though there were some secret afoot, plots not to be overheard by outsiders. They gain permits from the likes of Mac to build more edifices on our land, eroding the holdings of the clan. He gifts these lands in perpetuity. We are diminished from the inside by a force that has never lifted a single weapon. Seamus. How does your world compare to what followed, sire? Fla. We did not do damage to our womenfolk, but held them in great esteem as nurturers and vessels of wisdom. What type of male malevolence would ever charge the wise as witches and put them to death in such an horrific fashion? How can anyone claim that such a faith has at its core a loving Father? The Christian Reformation was brought on in part because of corruption, but as it led to greater evil in the hateful animus of the sectarian divide in what was once the sister kingdoms of Dauriata and Dauriada. How can we heal this divide which turned the nation of United Irishmen, Protestants, Catholics and Dissenters against the status quo on its head, now a pipe dream? The bile runs so deep. This is a very difficult swamp to clear. I think the division wrought by the variety of Christian denominations has brought much grief to the Celtic kingdoms as they had existed. The Sassenach adopted the principle of divide and rule to good effect, splitting in two what might have been a natural union. Both Scotland and Ireland suffered in this way. It is ironic that this kingdom linked the two countries and that in history the Christian Church has severed them so fiercely. It seems that your portion, a Glaswegian of Irish descent, may find a way through your writing to aid in the process of building a bridge back to the mutual values held by these countries in the past. The DUP, the The Orange Order and the narrowness of their ilk stand like a huge bulkhead against such a notion. But perhaps you will be able to find a way if you can find a path in your own heart. We used to do battle over cattle. Being human, we held grudges from time to time over insults, real or imagined, but we did not breed hatred over ideological differences. Mac's adoption of the Christian faith, while disappointing to me, did not produce that kind of enmity. Bury the bias and build the commonwealth. The world needs to turn to the collective and leave the touted rugged individualism which builds little save greed and egotism. All members of the clan should be cared for in an equal manner. We should live one for the other, allowing none to go without. This was a major tenet of our way of life, but even we in our feeble humanity did not always live up to our values. That does not mean to say that it should not be the proper goal. It is always best to pay as much attention to the heart as to the head. The heart or feeling can be, like intuition, the greatest of guides. Compassion and empathy are the best ways to treat your fellows. Should the society adopt these values wholeheartedly, it would thrive. Seamus, what is my role in your saga, sire? Why me? Fla, I require you to tell our dynastic tale. You have been given the struggle with faith in your own lifetime, which increases your awareness of the dynamic I felt in my soul in my contention with the new faith and the old tradition. Your struggle is in the reverse. Brought up in such a strong Catholic faith, it held you, as you are wont to say, like a major woof in the tapestry of your being, until slowly it was loosened as you opened yourself to a greater weave, including seeking torn threads of Celtic spirituality to intertwine some longing, yearning in your soul. When you came to Danad and felt your spirit leap to the haunting sound of the wind and found your soul responding to the scattered rocks that once were part of the outer fortifications of the fort, signs to you of an earlier time, an earlier connection to the place, a mystery. Seamus, what is my role in honouring the forgotten land, sire? Fla, I believe you have been doing this with poems written so far on Danad and the Kilmartin Valley, as well as your Celtic poems as a whole. I also feel you continue to write on this theme, as in the poems cited here, The Sustainer, and other poems dedicated to Mother Earth and the elements. The Sustainer. I am the rainfall that sustains the earth. I am the sun's blessing on the bending wheat. I am the wind-carried seed. I am the harvest that enlivens the throng. I am the windfall from the blessing tree. I am the teeming udder on the belling cow. I am the full blossoms on a summer's day. I am the fruit of all that bears. I am the bee-born pollen. I am the gold of the hive. I am the horn of plenty. I am the height of summer. I am the waxing of the sea. I am the growth of the children. I am the burgeoning of talent. I am optimism in the eye of youth. I am the laughter in the soul. I am the contentment of the giver. I am the blessing for those who receive. I am the weaver of dreams. I am the shaper of fate. I am the tree of life. I am the break in the fall. I am the dawn in your darkness. I am the sustainer of all. I believe you will continue to reveal the forgotten land as you rekindle the fire of your tradition. You shall reveal what was hidden. You shall be, as long as you have breath, a rememberer. Seamus, how How am I to transfer my tradition to Turtle Island where now I stand, sire? Fla. You must venture out to your river more often, to the place that brings you peace, where you perform your Samhain ritual, the place where Frank said he saw your father. You must walk out each day to seek contact with the mother. You should reacquaint yourself with the wondrous woods not too far distant and feel the pulse of the land upon which you stand. Seamus, is there a parallel here, sire? Why does Damaris speak of the blood of the land upon which I settled? Fla. There may be parallels between Danad and the natural territory around you. The tragedy of colonisation there and the infliction of residential schools would have been even more traumatic on the people of the Longhouse than the change felt by some Celts like myself with the coming of Christianity. The conversion of the Irish Celts was said to have been bloodless. The same cannot be said for the treatment of the natives in the attempt to kill the Indian within. This may be what lies behind Damaris's use of the word blood. I suppose the main similarity lies in the disruption of a way of life, especially the spiritual element. Spirituality lies at the very heart's core of the people. A shift therein, hostile or peaceful, is chiasmic. With regard to the spilt blood, I feel it refers first to the blood spilled in tribal wars of Turtle Island, when man closed himself off from his neighbours, grew distant from and fearful of the other. This divide grew exponentially with the advent of the European, who devastated the tribes, creating a flood of native blood, which mingled with the bloody bodies of the slaughtered bison draped over the Great Plains. This is the blood of the land, the memory that lies shallow beneath the soil and mirrored in the advantaged settlers, the harsh and seemingly heartless invaders, who forget the blood spilled to usurp the land from those living there before their coming. I also feel that the blood of Turtle Island is the pulse you must seek to be fully a part of the environment. You must seek nourishment for your soul where you stand. Remember the words of the shaman from Burnt Church, New Brunswick. You'll sing here, and the song will reverberate on Danad. This is a declaration of the unity of Mother Earth. She knows no boundaries, heeds no walls. She is like the tree's root that explodes through the man-made concrete of the paved garden path. She awaits your communing with her, your discovery of where you are and other parts of yourself that lie as yet hidden. It is time for you to carry yourself entirely over the great water and seek your destiny in the vast, oft frozen land. You need now to embrace the modern adage, think globally, act locally. You must pull all feeling and insight together where you are. The full impact will be revealed as you navigate the current bend of the river. Seamus, what does the symbolism of the pregnancy in Damaris's journey mean, sire? Fla. It signifies the weight of my progeny, Mac, and the onus he has placed on my heart, which you are delineating here. The symbol is also an omen of new life, vitality, that our intertwined lives promote. It can be seen as a sign of inspiration for you to produce a profound peace from this current undertaking. The pregnancy is your own, carrying on the tradition that has been seeded in your soul. You must carry it with care and nurture it so that it be born full and fertile into the world. It is good for you to take time each day to consider in deep contemplation what has been asked of you, the task at hand. As you wrote 9 years ago, the vision may come from deep inside you, and you must take time to pause to connect with that essence. Remember, the idea is to tell my tale with clarity and power, that the sown seed will spring forth in full radiance on the page. Remember that Eliach will share the beauty of the bardic order to help you realise fully my story. With Eliach's aid, the shared inspiration, the continued discipline of your craft and constant drive of your pilgrim heart, the goal will be achieved and my spirit will find a haven. This life that I carry, I expect will spring from your hand in a piece powerfully telling of the tale of Mac and myself. It will include a feel of the clan, how we lived, loved and renewed ourselves in the warm embrace of the mother on Danad and environs. You will be as a midwife in bringing forth the new life. Remember how you felt upon your first visit to Danad. Your entire being seemed to respond to the place as though you were returning. The very rocks seemed to greet you. The wind pierced the depth of your soul. You recognized then that this was a most special, dare I say, sacred place for you. This is the reason for my choice of chronicler. Seamus, tell me something of your youth, growth to manhood, and your later kingship, sire. Fla. My young life was typical of the day, roaming the hills, going to the nearby coast to swim, playing common, listening to the shanachis and the bards in the long soft summer evenings, or around a communal fire in the star-encrusted darkness of a winter's night, being schooled by the local master to read and calculate. There was a wondrous freedom growing up in Dauriada, a sense of being part of a pulsing whole. As I grew to manhood, I learned the arts of war under the tutelage of my mother's brother. I learned to wield a sword, to unloose an arrow from the pliant bow, throw a javelin with accuracy. I became a fairly adept warrior, sought after by a number of the Fianna. My prowess as a warrior, my sturdy build, my quickness of mind and even temperament all contributed to my selection as heir to my mother's brother, King Finbar. I had learned much from Finbar and felt in readiness when the crown was offered to me. As explained earlier, the crown, due to the advance of the Christian faith, lay heavy on my head. This advance saddened me, and I resisted as best I could. Even though I had been baptized as a child, my heart was never in it. I reigned with a deep desire for justice, a willingness to hear people out, and a tendency towards clemency rather than punitive judgment or heavy criticism. As for the security of Dauriada, I forged a peace pact with the Britons of Dumbarton. They did not send forays against us or sneak in the night to raid our cattle. The Picts from the east were a far greater threat throughout my reign. They harried us when we were not ourselves seeking them out. It was in one of our excursions into their territories that I met my death. I made an error in judgment by chasing after a Pictish warrior fleeing the field. While I focused on this figure, I failed to see a foe somewhat elevated off to my right. He cast a javelin which struck and penetrated my right rib cage, ultimately reaching my heart. I knew as soon as it struck that it was a fatal blow. I fell heavily from my horse, dead before I hit the ground. Mac dug a grave where I fell and built a little cairn over me to mark my resting place. He, being a devout Christian, fashioned a cross of scraps of wood and placed it among the rough stones of the cairn. I was pained he did not carry my body back to Danad for burial on Inishna Druidnya, island of the Druids, or as they call it now, Iona, the sacred island, the burial place of kings. He had felt that I, as one who had lived by the elder ways, was not fit to be buried in the consecrated earth of St. Columba. He was later to regret this decision and do reparation for his action. Seamus, though you have touched on Damaris's skeleton vision earlier, you spoke more about it in terms of potential inspiration. Could you explore it more in terms of its meaning regarding Mac and yourself, sire? You'll remember Damaris saw you as a skeleton bearing a skeleton within your frame. Fla. I had some unforeseen troubles with my son. The image suggests to me that he was like some animal, a viper, let's say, gnawing at my innards, sapping my vitality. He was like a fifth column to my being. I don't know when it began specifically, but from the time he returned from his journey abroad, Rome and Ireland, he was a changed man. He held our traditions as anathema and practiced his Christianity with such zeal it ate away at my heart and our relationship soured. If I suggested a way forward or sought to give him advice, he would brusquely dismiss my words. This was difficult for me, who had loved him so much as a boy. Where does such felicity go? How could that sweet boy now remonstrate so shrilly with me over my deep-seated beliefs? What has happened to the virtue of filial piety? Why does this religion, supposedly imbued with love, turn him against his own father? It is a strange way to be holy, to be filled with such enmity against another, because that person has a different God or holds a set of values slightly different from one's own. I was a good and honourable man, compassionate and generous to all my subjects and merciful to my enemies. Why did he judge me so vilely? Why glare at me as though I were a monster? Why did he refuse to see any worth but endlessly find fault? What wrong had I done him, or any man, that I should be so treated? His priests showed me greater respect. This invasive faith built a barrier between us, and there seemed no way over nor around it. The priests bent over their ornate books, fashioning their stories to pass down to their later generations, captured him heart and soul. He aided them with alms and support, while some of his own languished in want. There was no reasoning with him. When you attempted to point out some foible in his beliefs or cast a shadow over some tenets of his faith, he became defensive and screamed at me, saying I would find myself in the endless fire of the smouldering abyss of the Christian hell. Again, why would a benign creator fashion such a bleak and frightening plan for creatures he made? Why make such imperfect creatures to have them ultimately punished in such a horrendous way? He talked of free will bringing human beings to this end, and that we must follow the divine will to be saved. He proffered his commandments as a way to achieve this. Commandments written in books inspired in the Middle East and recorded by Jews centuries ago. They claimed the books are the Word of God. Seamus, were there any tensions between you both, sire? Fla. Yes, there were. He was very strong-willed like his mother. He was always resisting my suggestions as to his general behaviour. He tended to see only black and white, ignoring the many shades of grey. In his youth, he found it distressful when he had to share with others. He tended to focus on his own wishes to the exclusion of all else. He would lord it over others as though he was innately their superior. I don't know from whence this came. Perhaps we, his mother and I, indulged him too much. Or perhaps his uncle when Mac lived with him in those formative years. There were then, besides his narrow-minded religious beliefs, his spendthrift ways, his egotism, his lack of respect. He scoffed at our rituals, calling them barbaric and of the devil. These attitudes in my own son sat very ill with me. I bore them, as I have said, like a viper gnawing inside of me. Do not mistake me, I loved him both boy and man. No doubt it was the depth of my feeling for him that brought me such disquiet. I just hope that should he be recognised as king after me, that he has matured and reigns as a servant of the people and not as a narcissistic tyrant. This vexation is an unnatural onus for a father, and one that I would be most happy to cast aside. The pain in the heart of a father of an ungrateful son dams the blood and drains the vitality. I was pregnant with the shame of it, for the king's son was ever in the public eye. Perhaps if I had chided him more while young and disciplined him more tellingly, he would have grown straight and true. I held out hope that he would see his missteps before falling into perfidy. I continued to hope and push to banish despair. I was bent over with the burden, but sought nonetheless to birth a son worthy of our people. Mac chose to side with the Christian faith against the remnants of our tradition. He sought out the God of Abraham, turning his back on the Druids and his father's allegiance to the old gods and goddesses. For example, Dagda, the good god, Lu, the bringer of light, Epona of the horse, and the great Bridget, the all-sustaining mother. I have always been a teacher of my people, and they have listened to my words. Seamus, could you give me some highlights of your life, sire? I remember the beauty of my mother, her tenderness and grace. She was fairly tall and held herself with a calm dignity. She spent time rearing us, though she could have dispatched us easily to others, as she was a noblewoman and had servants at her beck and call. It was she who first introduced me to the great stories of our people, the Táin, Finn and the Fianna, and the 3 sorrowful tales of Erin. She would entertain us with such as these before we slept, and tucked us in beneath the hide coverings of our cots. She died when I was 7, and it was not long thereafter that I was sent to her brother Finbar at the not-too-distant Inverary. He treated me well and taught me in the arts of the warrior and the ways of survival in sometimes telling times. He tended to me like a son, as he had been very devoted to his sister, and I received the blessings of this love. My fosterage under Finbar did not isolate me from Danad, as the fort did not lie far away from where I grew up, and this allowed me to visit my father and my peers any time. I would wander on my way to Danad through the many mounds and standing stones that dotted the landscape of Kilmartin. There was a plethora of cairns, megalithic stones, cists and pictographic rocks that stretched from one end of the glen to the other. The terrain was awe-inspiring and held great mystery. Magic to a young lad like myself, bounding like a young deer through its varied wonders. The Kilmartin Glen brought to my childhood a sense of history and a deep awe for the past. Kilmartin. The glen runs long and its paths meander. The rain, heavy and light, cleanses and renews the ancient lava rock, enciphering still lozenges, spirals and circles, etched so long ago by a people crafting meaning in the pale dawn of recorded time. Guarding memory, each sight along the way stores the vale's history like a book of braille, page after page, an inlaid script unfolding. The wandering ad snakes through the encrusted peated floor, this place of kings, wherein lies the crowning rock of Danad, with its totemic bower of sovereignty and martial resilience. Tears of the years that cover Martin's cell, Temple Wood's ring of stone, sacred spaces, other monoliths grouped and single, their stories lost through the fleeting years stand, where the wind caresses them now as from the edge of time. Seamus muses on the central metaphor in the presence of the king. I feel from Damaris's vision of the king bearing the skeleton of your son within your frame suggests that you are being eaten alive by the conduct of your son and heir. Such is your depth of feeling on the subject that it gnaws at you, usurping your vitality. You feel your son is in fact destructive of your cherished traditions. You wish it were otherwise. At root, you feel betrayed. Interestingly, I too, under different circumstances, feel my own entrails have been gnawed at by an offspring. I too have been made to feel uneasy and cautious in my own life. There is so much unknown and damage that one lives in the shadow of a future punishing potential. I suppose I could or should remind us both of the wisdom of Buddha's stress on the now, namely to hold to what is right in front of one, and not to be worried about what's to come, over which one has little control, or what is past, as there is no reparation for that. It may be the offspring is caught toing and froing between those impossible poles. It is, however, for you to seek the balance and recognise you have done your best to guide Mac, but you cannot live your life for him. That ultimately is his to do. Let the sorrow you feel over his choices fall from you like the ebbing waves over the shore-bound rocks. Let the tension go and drop the skeleton that encumbers you, realising that you cannot birth a second you, that often our offspring have no truck with what has gone before, but rather seek new pastures and brave new worlds. You have to let go, or the waves will pull you out to sea to drown in abject sorrow. Seamus. Sire, are you like a hungry ghost to reconnect with Donad? Fla. In you I have found my reconnection. You have done it for me by standing thereon and affirming my way of life, lying beyond the Christian influx when we were more unified in it and in ourselves. I felt part of a whole before the priests came to wrench us apart, dividing our sense of wholeness with all things. I wanted always for our clan to return to the Halakon days beyond the barbarous notion of hell and damnation. Remember that the greatest dread for a Celt was to be driven from the warmth of the hearth, the spirit of home. I myself died in a foreign field, and my son neglected to bring me back immediately, but left me interred far from Donad and the Holy Isle. I yearned for my true resting place. He eventually saw the light through his bedimmed Christian eyes and had me brought home. He now in turn atones for his failing. Seamus. Speak to me, sire, of the Great Mother and the Oran Mor. Fla. We held close to the Mother in all we did. She was a focal point, an omphalos. The source you seek is in her giving womb. For you it is just to remember and stand with her. The Oran Mor is her beating heart. As Frank McEwen suggests, one needs but listen to be in tune with the constancy of her pulse. Be still. Allow the silence to penetrate. Plumb the depths until you feel the wholeness behind the many shifting veils. Be still as often as you can and listen to the breathing of the universe. Feel the energy. Reconnect with the Mother who continually graces you. Reconnect as you remember. Your seeking heart will stand you in good stead. Your inner vision increases as your corporeal eyes grow dim. Believe this. Let your spirit loose, for I shall reach for you across the millennia and whisper to you in the hushed stillness of your heart. I shall come in many forms to attend your dreams, and you will be awed by my presence so strongly realized, for we are, after all, one. Seamus. Tell me of your faith, your trust in life, your sense of the rightness of things, sire. Fla. We lived as part of the great whole. Mother Earth was our sustenance. We did not see ourselves as something apart, never mind a dominating presence. We were one. Everything around us was sacred. Water, for example, without which we would perish, was especially so, no matter its form. the seething sea, the fluent river, the cascading stream, the wondrous waterfall, the careening rapids, the placid lochs, the torrent of rain, the mystery of mist, all the waters of life, a blessing. The holy mountain suffused with beauty, upon which the unfolding of a multicoloured panorama can be seen, a great lift to the soul. The height itself magnifies the spirit, and we are raised up. The fertile valleys wherein the Great Mother pours forth her abundance to feed us and bless us with her utmost benevolence. The trees bear fruit for our consumption and rend material for us to fashion useful vessels and timber with which to build dwellings. They are also totems, gifting us metaphors of strength to mirror parts of ourselves. These great sensate beings of the wondrous forest, lungs of the earth. In the soft verdant woods we keep our sacred groves and stand amid our sentinels, the trees, to find in their symbolic strength ways to persevere. The trees have their own constancies to bestow. They bless us so fully, a book of leaves for all occasions. Our people associated certain trees to times in their calendar and held a number of them to be especially sacred: the oak, the hazel, and the rowan. We gathered in the nematon to say or chant our incantations, bringing a focus to the energies of the sacred sites. The sun we hold in greatest esteem. It is the sun spirit that spreads light and warmth upon us. Under its auspices we live and prosper. Without it we perish. We hold all things as sacred. We look to the essence of things, to the pulse within, to the energy that engages and permeates everything. All is alive to us and deepens thereby our own vitality. We are quickened. Seamus. How much did the advance of Christianity diminish the sense of unity in the clan system, sire? Fla. This was a body blow to our culture which left us reeling. Mac is a perfect example of how far it gained ground. I maintained my bond with the natural world, continued to follow the advice of my druids and partook in their timeless rituals born from the ancestors. We valued the elements, felt drawn to places where we were weaned. The sacred land that nourished and sustained us. We were so grateful to her, without whom we would perish. We gazed on her beauty, her rivers, lochs, gurgling streams, depth of glen and swell of mountain, the running sun and the still solitary moon, the mystical trees planted to sustain the breath, their colourful leaves, their natural gifts of fruit and healing, reflecting strength and solidity. The animals are totemic friends who inspired our hearts to be brave. In our ways, the clan was a base, our unifying factor, our core. We cared for our own deeply. Nothing was too much. We extended the love and care of family out into the world through hospitality. The Celts, as you know, were renowned for this virtue. We were connected one with the other, and all with the mother who nurtured us. We were grateful one to the other and aware always of the goodness of the whole. The spirits of the ancestors stay close to their haunts, and in the times like Samhain and thin places like Templewood, they can slip to wander with the living. We believe that the worlds are not too distant, much closer than the Christian notion of heaven as somewhere above. The worlds are in touch with each other. Seamus, do you feel there is a spiritual admonishment in accepting, like Mac, the newer faith, sire? Fla. Yes, besides his gifting of much of his wealth to the church, he in fact diminished his spirituality. We, like the Hindus, accept the concept of immanent divine. Tatvamasi, that art thou, could easily have been uttered by our Druids. The concept of immortality was a given in a society where warriors went naked into battle unafraid. There was a depth in our belief in the immortality of the soul, a world hereafter not unlike our own, only richer and without pain. Not for us the fear of some hell's fire burning our flesh for eternity. We envisioned places of peace and plenty to come. It was our attitude towards this life to come that allowed us, in times past, to go forth into battle naked, save for a torque and our trusted shield. We would shed the current body to have it replaced within the blink of an eye. Death, where is thy sting indeed? The Christians feel the way they live their lives here on earth determines how their future life will be. If they live a sinful, unrepentant life, their lot will be the fire, with a potential escape route via purgatory. If you lived a good life according to the dictates and conventions of the society and church, you were heaven-bound. What heaven would be like is a place or state of peace and serenity, but hardly as full of wonder as Tirnanog or the land of apples. We were immortal and walked in a landscape where every stone and pebble, grove and dale, stream and well, fall and eddy, pap and ben, cave and cairn were sacred, and the holy dwelt there as within. We were not separate from the natural world, but breathed and lived as part of it. We were not lords over creation, but denizens along with the flora and fauna, part of the cosmic whole, mindful of our place and in awe of the Newman enveloping us. The new faith seemed to shatter the wholeness, seeing, for example, the dark and light of our accepted wholeness as some dreadful polarity, where dark is evil and light is good. We hold the dark as earth's womb, not simply sin or death, but the cauldron of transformation, the mystery of birth and fecundity. Black is fruitful, as you outlined in your poem, Nameless Day. Nameless Day. Note: the Celts divided the year into two halves, dark and light. Deeply tied to nature, they held trees in high regard. Their months were each associated with a particular tree or bush. One day of the year, however, held no such association. December the 22nd. Buried in the depth of winter, was known as Nameless Day, and was linked with Morrigan, the ancient goddess of death. On this day, according to Jane Gifford in her book Wisdom of Trees, the people fasted to appease the goddess so that she would allow the sun to return. Here is the poem, which looks from the darkness of our days to the potential hope in the light to come. The Oran Mor mentioned is the song of the universe, akin to the music of the spheres. The rough-cast stone is a reference to the method of composition adopted by the bards who would lie in the dark for a day with a rough stone on their chest to keep them awake while they created a new poem. Part 1. I shed darkness like a chimney at soot, disturbed by bell and book in the breaking light. My world is reinvented. Colours deepen and the way clears. My steps strengthen in the new light as the earth turns again towards the spring's growing. I shed the pain, it falls from me like water from a rock face. The river changes course, but in the elemental remains the sun. It sparkles in the falling light, flowing ever on. How dank the air, how hard the place to walk, and the pillow we lay our frigidity every night. We are on guard for our bits and pieces and our very selves as we lie in the chartered place for our sleep. So harsh a life, we seek relief wherever we can. The hands uplifted bear simple shrouds. The trees trail leaves like tears upon the lamenting ground. The chartered streets have imprisoned the people who walk around in circles, going and going nowhere. The poor hold nothing in their hand and only fear in their hearts. The land lies fallow in the grip of harsh frost. Trees stand like in some ante-Eden, ice-laden, frozen. The sea is grey, tumultuous under a baleful moon. The glories of the sacred grove, captive in a shifting mist, seem fallen away. We are in a liminal world, caught in the hasp of the year, longing for renewal. It is here, in the burgeoning dark, that the brooding begins. Here the spark of life ruminates, ponders its next path in the fallow but ever fertile earth. In the fallowness there is rest and recuperation. The waning sun fades and we await its warm waxing. The mother, turning in her sleep, dreams of tomorrow. Part 2. As barred, I lie dreamlike in the incubating dark. Images flit through me, teeming, fleeting and fecund. The rough cast stone holds alertness. The dark falls to humming. The silence echoes. I remember the mother beating around me, and am myself remembered in the primal dark. My heart pulsing with pristine awareness of a new creation, springing from the still centre, sparked in a ubiquitous overflow of the throbbing plenitude of the sustaining mother. We rest under the moon, attentive to our intuition that speaks of the essential of our being, immortal in the penumbra of unknowing. In the liminal space of transformation, the energy shifts imperceptibly towards the coming light, the crepuscular moment which turns the pallid bright. Sinews of the heart, dreaming the eternal greensward, remembering the song, joining again in the chorus of the Oran Mor that envelops us, where truth is harmony and justice the rhythm. The light that seeps in is like a portal opening to life renewed. The Celts were not troubled too much by death. As for them, they only lost the current vehicle of the soul as the essence moved on. The Christians, despite their claims of immortality, seem very anxious about death, perhaps as it holds the terror of hell. We awaited no such transcendental life. Our spirituality accompanied us in the here and now. In like manner, we hold that the world in which we live and breathe is also spiritual, and the external reality is connected vibrantly with the indwelling spirit. Christianity dismisses our inner divinity, save in the notion of being made in the image and likeness of God, a worn-out and seemingly empty phrase. They place their divinity as transcendent, far removed from natural life, far away from the pulsing heart of humanity. Mac has given up the heritage of his people and his immanent soul to follow the Christian Church's expulsion of the felt life, to support it with the notion of a distant divinity which is entirely beyond the ken of humanity. No divinity within, but also no participation in divinity without, and that is the mythological base of the wasteland of the modern soul, or as it has been called these days, alienation, as from Joseph Campbell. We have lost touch with the true sacredness of the earth. The Church has subsumed some of our holy places, but they did so in an artificial manner, honouring their sainted people rather than the healing source that was ours. They attributed the natural healing to the saints so named, who had supplanted our own numinous spirits. The wasteland for me represents the forgetting of the connections of our souls with all that exists in nature. Since the advent of Christianity, our beings have been sundered from the mother, our sense of wholeness ripped into a dichotomy, body, soul, good, evil. We are placed in contending polarities and left fractured. The rejection of the feminine is an abomination. It is to turn our back on the source of life, the birthing and sustaining source. The role of Mary in the Christian church is but a shadow of the power held by our goddesses, our Maeve, Anu and Bridget, great sustainers and formidable mothers, keepers of life and sovereignty of the very earth. Seamus, do you have an overarching metaphor for this narrative, sire? Have you a bridge into your tale of pain and betrayal? Fla. It is a truth that all we can be certain of in life is change. The movement of Christianity across this kingdom was swift, and while I did my utmost to hold on to the traditions of my fathers and felt it deeply galling that my son usurped my ways to replace them with these newfangled ones, breaking my heart in the process. He also brought great shame upon me when he pilfered from the hoard of goods a rare, ornate goblet left to honour the great Mother Bridget, in order to give it to a priest in his new and burgeoning church. Nothing could be of greater insult to our people and way of life than this sacrilege, a betrayal of all we are. This was anathema, the final straw. In the early stage of his conversion, the neophyte grew more gentle. He was a model of even-handedness and given to demonstrations of compassion in Dalriada and beyond. Somewhere, however, things all went askew. He began to pass judgment on his fellows, using newly learned pejorative terms like pagan and heathen to describe them. His heart turned sour towards our ways. He became dismissive of our druids and their rituals, used to safeguard us in the benevolence of our gods. We became ostracized by him as he became more entwined in his new religious path. He followed a god who, as I have previously mentioned, sent creatures he fashioned to a fetid pit for not fully following a list of divine orders. To me, as I pondered on the likes of our great Mother Bridget, our sustainer, this Christian god seemed an abomination, a cruel despot of divinity. Our other worlds were so much more benign, yet Max seemed caught like a rabbit in a snare. Caught, and the longer he remained, the more entrapped he became. Matters became more vexing when Mac, in his fervour, began to leave Danad to spend time on the island with his Christian brethren, neglecting in so doing his primary duties in the king's retinue. He sold off some of his possessions, giving the proceeds to the priests and monks of what he called his holy island. The most significant fault he committed was, as already mentioned, that of robbing from the votive offerings. These were items gained from war, pillage, given to honour the gods and goddesses. It is a most grievous wrong to touch anything from this hoard. Mac became enamoured of a drinking vessel, a gilded cup. He thought it would be a splendid chalice to use for mass. Mac brashly took it to the island. This was like an arrow through my already bruised heart. In so doing, he brought dishonour not only on me, but the entire clan. Such was the weight of blasphemy. This action drove Mac even further from the heart of our ways. He went on his way fervently, wholeheartedly, with an ardour and fanaticism that seemed to know no turning. This theft was the final straw in Mac's separating from our traditional belief system. He had stepped beyond the boundary, the circle of our wholeness. This was a catastrophic break, a severance. He took the goblet as he felt it was his duty to save such a glorious vessel from a pagan rite and sanctify it as a chalice for the mass wine. He had a similar position regarding having my body interred in Iona. This he held was wrong, as the graveyard of Iona to him was now hallowed Christian ground and out of bounds to non-Christians. Mac thus cast off our traditions to bend his knee before the altar of his new God. Part 3. Mac's Tale. Seamus. Why have you embraced so wholeheartedly the Christian faith, Mac? Mac. I had an occasion to hear, while still a youth, a powerful sermon by a priest from Iona, who had come to Dunad to say Mass. I was deeply moved by the saga of Jesus and his disciples. The call to peace and love appealed to my young heart. I wanted to become an ardent follower of Christ, to obey the commandments of both God and his church. I sought to be upright in this life in order to be worthy of the kingdom of heaven in the next. My father the king paid only lip service to the new faith. He held fast to the old ways of our people. He continued to listen to the advice and counsel of his druids, whom he held in great esteem. He was disturbed by my decision to give myself fully to the Christian faith, thus breaking with centuries-held tradition of our people. I was unable to convince him that I had been spiritually renewed and felt much at home in Christianity. It made me feel part of a universal body of faith centred in the great and famed city of Rome. I also enjoyed the liturgy with its wonderful cadences. I began to learn Latin so that my understanding of the Mass grew. In like manner, I was taken by the pageantry of High Mass, the flowing ornate vestments, the thurible with its aromatic incense, the voices raised in praise. All seemed to evoke a sense of transcendence that lifted me to ponder the vastness of eternity. I find solace in the faith, in the idea of a universal brotherhood, the central concept of love which brings us all together as one family. In following the commandments, I try to treat my neighbour in a just and respectful way, and to contain negative yearnings that might be destructive to myself or others. I feel the Christian faith has made me a better human being. Seamus. What do you say to your father's contentions against the faith and the way you now live your life? Mac. I feel the Christian is the one true faith and give myself to it heart and soul. I feel it is my duty to give to the church from my coffers, as the priests and monks need donations to sustain their great task of bringing the gospel to the pagan world. I also, through my giving, gain indulgences to aid my soul's journey in the life of the resurrection. My relationship with the Holy Trinity blesses me and makes me whole. Jesus said, "The poor you have always with you." My focus is Jesus and ensuring that my soul is in a state of grace to receive him in the sacrament of the Holy Eucharist. The way I open to the Trinity during Mass is profound, and I feel blessed and protected, held close in their divine embrace. The ritual satisfies me greatly, and as I listen to and at times partake in the hymns and lauds, I am transported to a place of peace. I thought it, as I have said, a sacred duty to support my God and his church above all claims on this temporal plane. My faith was the absolute core of my being, and my path to the heavenly hereafter lies open to me through the indulgences gained with my donations. I have no regrets for my actions, nor do I feel that I have committed any sin, either of commission or omission. My father disagrees about this matter. He feels that my feet should be planted in the here and now rather than in some errant future life. He thinks the money spent on sacred vessels and the like would be better used in aiding clan members fallen on difficult times. He deems my attitude selfish and neglectful of the common weal. Seamus. What happened to your father's wishes regarding his burial, Mac? Mac. As king of Dalriada, his place of entombment should have been on Iona, the long-established resting place of our kings. I felt, however, that Iona was now hallowed ground of the Christian faith, and therefore no place for my father's corpse, as he had been antagonistic to the church and had died in a state of sin, a pagan. On the other hand, I felt he might be upset to be buried to lie as a dissident among the church's faithful. Mac's recantation. On the first anniversary of my father's death, I found myself in a deep depression. My soul was disturbed. I hied to my confessor, my Anam Cara, an aged and holy man who had tried to steer me away from being caught too much in the laws of the church and turn me instead to the path of love and compassion. He it was who pointed out that he thought my soul was vexed because of the way I had contended with my father over religion, and had refused to accept his heartfelt feeling for the old traditions. The priest pointed to an overbearing hubris in my not accepting my father's right to hold his own beliefs. After the consultation with this wise man who, it is said, was a druid before his conversion to Christianity, my heart was full sore regarding the grief I had my father carry through his life because I, his firstborn son, had turned my back on all he had held dear. I vowed then to atone to the best of my ability for the pain I had caused him. My first action was to return to the grave we had fashioned for him on the battlefield where he had fallen, to retrieve his body and bring him home to Iona as he would have desired. I felt at his grave in the cemetery of kings a heavy remorse over my initial feeling of his unworthiness to be so interred. In like manner, my stealing of the golden goblet for use at Mass was as a knife to his heart and a great ignominy. I realised now I was going beyond all boundaries of common decency. I shall refuse the crown if offered, as I am totally unworthy to wear it. In order to make further amends, I shall have our craftsmen fashion a new chalice for the church and take back the goblet I had so coveted earlier. My plan is to place the goblet in my father's tomb as a grave good, as our people did for the most important among them for centuries in the past. As for myself, I shall turn my back on wealth and power to go as a mendicant into the world with Christ as my druid, to work in humility with the poor and the forgotten. I shall walk on the path of peace and do what I can to be a healer of humanity. Seamus's summation. I believe that the movement by Mac of interring his father as the latter would have desired, and his atonement in reclaiming the goblet for a grave good, allow a way for the son, unjudgmentally, to recognise his father's way of life. This reflects well on Mac's final compassion towards his sire, the filial piety his father always sought. Fla, on the other hand, saw his brash and headstrong son adopt a mendicant's way of life, devoted to giving all he had to the poor and the needy of Dalriada and beyond. Mac restored honour to his father because the son's action reflected that major value of the Celtic tradition, hospitality, in the form of generosity of heart. So in the end, acceptance one of the other brought about a harmony between father and son. The two paths of the Celtic ways were laid down at the time on Donad. The son allowed his father his cherished traditions, and the king could then perceive his son continuing the tribe's most significant tradition in his adoption of the mendicant's way of life. They could unite thus, as life passes into life in the deepest way, through love.